A renowned scholar, Nwagriu, in 2001 states that one of the distinguishing features of Africa's political landscape are its many dysfunctional and protracted social and political conflicts. He went on to say that the problem is made worse by lack of effective mechanisms to manage these conflicts. This has had negative consequences, including the interruption of the development and diversion of scarce resources to the management of these conflicts. So, conflict resolution and peace building are issues which have become very topical in debates, conferences, and discussions in Africa. A lot, including colloquiums, dialogues, visitations, has been put in place by scholars, institutions, and the African Union, Peace and Security Commission, all in finding sustainable solutions to conflict resolution in Africa. Let's take a listen to some of the reactions.
Oh, we saw the humanitarian situation at first hand. We assessed the needs of the internally displaced persons in a place called Difa, which is in the Republic of Niger. We saw them also in Bakassi, in Maiduguri, and we can see that peace is gradually returning. We need to thank the gallantry and appreciate the gallantry of our armed forces, not only of Nigeria, but the three other countries of the Lake Chad Basin and Benin Republic, for the good record they have achieved.
The omnibus organizational structure put in place in Maiduguri called the Operation Safe Corridor, and it's a combination of prosecuting the war in the theater and humanitarian aspects, and also DDR program. It shows the mastery on the part of the Nigerian military in quelling insurgency and rebellions in other parts of the world.
Because what we need is certainty of punishment for those who are guilty, but to look at alternative ways of bringing justice and bringing closure, particularly for mass atrocities. You cannot go through the same usual process because those lead to delays. And as you know, justice delayed is also justice denied.
You know, we have to work together, and it's absolutely important that our regional body, the African Union, should be fully, engaged, and we appreciate that engagement.
Conflict in itself triggers a process that facilitates the establishment of durable peace and ties towards preventing recurrence of violence, aggression, and restiveness. Nigeria's Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, IPCR, is visible in the peace-building effort in Africa. Working in collaboration with the Center for African Peace and Conflict Resolution based in the United States of America, IPCR rolled out the 5th International Africa Peace and Conflict Resolution Conference on the theme Restorative and Community Justice, Prospects, Challenges, and Lessons. That is where we will tie the conversation on the program today in addressing peace-building efforts in Africa. My guest on the program is a scholar and international peace-building advocate, Professor Oshita Oshita. Professor Oshita Oshita is the Director General of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution in Nigeria. Thanks for joining me on Diplomatic Ties.
Thank you for having me.
The conversation continues after this time out. Stay with us. Okay, I'll come back to the conference now. Let me take you off a bit. Major concerns if you go to so many fora in Africa that has to do with conflict and solutions towards finding solutions to conflicts. You ask, when are we looking up to having a sustainable peace resolution of conflict in Africa?
Yeah. Well, the point is that you cannot have durable solutions when a number of things are not also in place that will complement the processes of, peace building. First, there must be investment in, peace building. We must understand that peace does not just happen. You have to work at it. You have to use early warning signs, to anticipate conflict and work with it. You have to manage diversity effectively. you have to ensure that there is, justice, that, is cutting across all spectrum, so that, you don't throw up things that will unsettle the peace. So clearly, if we look at the way we manage diversity across the continent, the way we, dispense justice, and we are sure that we are doing it the right way, surely peace will begin to, come up. But the thing is that we must also invest in the early warning signs. Many of our societies, we believe that the signs we see will not amount to something that is, an unhappy situation. Okay. Yeah, but clearly there are some predictable things that you can see, if we continue with this trend, this is what will come up. In the medium or long term, we must respect early warning signs. We must deal with those. We must invest in the process of understanding the signs in our society, rather than thinking that, time will heal all that. No, it doesn't work like that. And of course, that we also have deliberate spoilers within every society that will work. Their own objective is to ensure that the opportunities for peace are scuttled. So we call them spoilers in the practice. So you have to also know that they exist. And some people believe that it is within the mode of dysfunction that they make the best of their own businesses.
Okay.
Yeah. So, these are things that we also have to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In as much as the Agenda 2063 of the AU is targeting at giving youth a space, I also know that they are looking to the issues of silencing the guns, which relates to what you're doing, peace building efforts in Africa and particularly in Nigeria. What channels can best be used to attain this? Because some people still feel silencing guns may be difficult to attain.
No, you see, again, it is the same thing that we just talked about, that we need to be systematic about what we are doing. If we want to silence the guns the way, the aspiration is, then we need to work on the basics. First, we need to identify where the guns are coming from. We need to identify why the guns are being attractive. Again, when people use guns, are they being punished for doing that? You understand the issue of sanctions. Now, check. If people don't use self-help, do they have appropriate and responsive, mechanisms through which they can get redress? So you understand. So you have to arrest the source. You have to check issues of why these things are attractive to people. Why have they become options when they were not options previously? In the past, many conflicts at community levels were settled with cutlasses or sticks and all that. But today, the slightest one, guns come out. So we have to ask, why have we reached this stage? Why is it that small arms and light weapons have become so readily available in our community? So we must arrest the source. If we begin to do something constructive to arrest the source, then of course we can begin to deal on the issues of agitations. Why are people more likely to use guns now than they used to do before? And then we also have to make available to them, the knowledge about dialogue, dialoguing as an option, so that people begin to prefer dialogue and are less likely to resort to the use of weapons. So if you do that, we are addressing availability, and we are addressing reasons why people easily use the guns. And there are a number of other things that we need to check. So it requires proper understanding of the phenomenon and those other variables that lead to continued resort to the use of guns. Guns can be silenced, but we must take a total package. And of course, everyone knows that without peace, there cannot be development. But also without development, there cannot be peace. So if there is no development, And that is part of why people are agitated, and we focus on that, so that with development there can be peace.
Okay.
And
That takes me to this. It is said that part of why we have this in Africa is because we depend so much most time in the developed world. And recently, Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe has said it is high time Africans start looking within. That's the most reason in the last AU summit, he sold cattle worth $1 million and donated to the AU. Now start looking, if we look outwards, we depend more. Now, secondly, during the last peer review, Uhuru Kenyatta of Kenya said it was time Africans look to solving their own problems. Now, if we depend less on the developed world, don't you think we'll act faster?
Absolutely, yes. In fact, as far back as 2000 and I think 2010 or so, we had a major, conference or seminar in Addis Ababa. I was there with some Nigerian scholars on African solutions for African problems. We have been mounting this. We have been talking about this almost forever. The thing is, how can we get to doing that right from the strategic level downwards? You understand? Clearly, nobody can protect your interests more than yourself. And that's the principle. And I think that it's a good thing that African leaders are, back to that again, that we should look inward. Even the restorative justice that we are talking about, we have systems that are practiced elsewhere in the world. But coming to Africa, we have our own traditions and cultures. Now, restorative justice that is practiced in America cannot work in Africa. So we must work at, making restorative justice principles, agreeable with our culture and traditions. Okay. You understand? So, this is basic. So I agree with that principle that Africa needs to look more inward, because we have a lot of the solutions here. And sometimes we have the solutions here, we don't pay attention to them. We prefer to bring some people from Europe or America to come and bring the same solutions that have been put on the table here at home. And that's the problem. And if we continue like that, patronizing others when we have our own core, ideas here to utilize, to leverage, to do the things we need to do, then of course we will remain dependent, because we don't want to develop what is at home.
Okay, let's go back to your conference now. Yeah. You came up with a communique, right?
Yes, we did.
Implementing it, what network are you going to establish? I'm not looking at Nigeria's Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution alone. I'm looking at peace-building institutions in Africa, including IPCR.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What the communique has clearly stated, that we need to mobilize not just the Nigerian government, but African governments. We need to mobilize economic actors in the country and in the continent. We need to mobilize civil society organizations. We need to mobilize a cross-section of stakeholders, because these are all people, these are institutions that are embedded in society. Okay. And it is society and to the other level, communities that are going to use this, what will come out from this.
I'm happy I've gone towards direction now.
Yes.
Few days after your conference, the Peace and Security Commission of the AU was on a visitation to Nigeria, and they were at the Northeast, and a couple of the leader of the team, Nigeria PEM's rep at the AU was there, and you heard their comments. Is it possible you could borrow these ideas to them on resolving the areas that have been really recaptured in the Northeast?
No, absolutely,
the
yes.
operations of the multinational joint task force.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. We are in touch with His Excellency Ambassador Bankole, who is Nigeria's representative at the AU. And he understands the role of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Before his appointment, he had been, in touch with us. So we are believing that it will be possible for us to do a lot of backstopping, for for his office, and also given that Nigeria is chairing the Peace and Security Committee of the AU. So we are confident that that kind of liaison will be effective to enable us put in the right place the kind of ideas, even the resolutions that came out from the international conference that we've just held.
Is it possible too that it could be helpful to resolving the Sahel issues? Because when we spoke with the authorities on Sahel, they just finished a de-radicalization conference back in Ouagadougou. Okay. Will it be applied?
Oh, why not? You see, restorative justice can apply in a variety of situations, a variety of scenarios. Yeah, so it just depends on you understand what the problem is, do a proper analysis, and then get the principles of restorative justice, and then see if to what extent they can work. But as I said before, culture and tradition of the people must be taken into cognizance. Otherwise, it could backfire. Okay. But the important thing is that our cultures accept healing. And to the extent that traditionally we are tied to each other under the communalistic system before we began going individualistic, following the Western model, Now, since we naturally live in communities, then healing should be a precondition, because if you don't heal, then the community will not be healed, because we are all bonded in the community. Okay. And that's why, as I said before, the Ubuntu principle, says you live because I live, and I live because you live. Together, we make the community. So we think that restorative justice can apply in a variety of contexts in Africa, but everywhere is not the same. Okay. So we must look at the peculiarities of every context and understand how we tweak restorative justice to match the circumstance.
How could you apply, for instance, in Nigeria, we have repentant insurgents who are about to be back in the society. How can this apply?
Surely this is one place where it can apply very well. We work with IDPs in the Northeast. I have personally been there a number of times. I've interacted with them. And one of their fears is as they return, those that they have had serious issues with, who are from the same community, will be returning. So how would they handle that? On both sides, there will be suspicion, and this is natural. So this is where we can intervene, with mediation, using restorative justice principles. And also, we are trying to give even the IDPs, a select number of them, the capacity for insider mediation, so that when they return, some of them have the skills to be able to handle those kind of conflicts that will border around how do we coexist with somebody who has hurt us so much. Okay. You understand? So those are things that we can work, the details, can be worked out. So as those people are being returned, the ones that are in holding facilities and as they are being returned, they too, we will have to, work on them beyond what, other levels of the institutions, are working with them. We have to work with them so that we bring them to the mode of reconciliation. Okay.
So within the peace building network in Africa, and you are very strategic in this, because you have spoken to the fact that Africans need to look inwards.
Yes.
But most times it is the people you refer to as the spoilers. For instance, we are two parties, for instance. Your party gains, and because your party gains, I want to spoil by all means, forgetting that by the time we spoil, we'll all coexist in the same environment. How can we use the peace-building mechanisms to change the mindset of this class of persons in Nigeria and indeed the West African sub-region and Africa?
Now, the thing is that notice that conflict is inevitable. Now, so that means that at some point you must have people that you designate as spoilers. So the thing is, for us to work in a way that we can always change their orientation, we can always win them to the side of, positive, orientation, the side of accommodation. You understand? In doing that, there may be a few compromises here and there. Of course, you can't resolve conflict without some compromise from both sides. You understand? We do that, and then people begin to understand. You see people who will tell you that, oh, before I was doing this, I didn't know that this is. So you must bring the person to that state of mind where the person begin to appreciate that, dysfunction makes everyone, or rather, let's put it this way, violent conflict makes everyone vulnerable. And no one wins, actually, because the temporary winning that you think you have won in a violent context is something that you can lose in a jiffy, and it can include losing yourself. Okay. You understand? So it is in the best interest of all of us to coexist. It is in the best interest of all of us to work, in a joint problem-solving, mode, so that we can jointly solve the problems that, confront us. I mean, that has to do with changing perceptions. Okay. Because sometimes people think that because they have a problem, you are the one, they attribute it to you, that you caused their problem. So I mean, if they come to understand that, no, we are both vulnerable, that, my neighbor is not the source of my problem, and that we can work together to resolve the problem, then of course you see that people who will have been arch enemies will become happy, will be happy together, and then they will begin to focus on addressing the real source of their problem. So it's about perception, it's about education, because there is so much ignorance when it comes to things like that. Okay. And of course, when you are angry and you don't have the right information, you can jump into the lagoon. Okay. Yeah, but if you do have the right information, you will be saved.
Okay, as a last word as we conclude, it is said that if you have a good sense of history, you will not wish your enemy to have even a snippet of the scene of war. And now across Africa, starting from Nigeria, you have all kinds of agitations and onwards towards people agitating for a total war. What message do you have for this class of persons as a peace builder? And I believe they are listening to you and other networks of your kind on the need for them to always look at resolving conflict from a non-violent approach.
Indeed, my message would be to people agitating for all kinds of things, that dialogue is the best way, to get one's position understood. And people often assume a lot. Some people who are agitating, they don't understand the full, implications of what they are agitating. I mean, somebody gave an example of somebody who joined a crowd and was protesting, and when a journalist like you called the person and said, what exactly are you protesting against? And the person said, well, I'm just following them because they are doing it. So people need to understand the full implications of what they are agitating for. And I believe that we can discuss and understand these issues, and there are many people who are agitating that once they have full, knowledge of what, they are talking about, they are going to shift and, even admit that they have made some mistakes in taking positions that they have taken. As a peace builder, I believe that dialogue is the only way. And of course, that the world, history has shown us that everything, even after everything, we still, look for the table, the dialogue table, to discuss. And I think that since this fact of history exists, we should begin with the dialogue table rather than come to it when we have exhausted ourselves and battered ourselves.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you very much.
We've been discussing peace-building efforts in Africa towards attaining sustainable peace in Africa. And my guest today on the program has been a scholar, a peace-building advocate, and the Director General of Nigeria's Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Professor Oshita. I believe you enjoyed the program while it lasted. Thanks for being there and on behalf of all of us.